Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today, both in person and virtually. It's a pleasure to welcome such a distinguished audience, members of the press, and our fantastic panel today. Your presence underscores the urgency and importance of today's conversation on textiles recycling and circularity. I'm Zied Chetoui, the event manager, and I'm honored to represent AMI and the event we are organizing, Textiles Recycling Expo. AMI is a leading provider of international exhibitions and conferences for the plastics and recycling market, and at AMI, sustainability is at the heart of everything we do. Over the years, we have built a strong track record in hosting industry-leading events across the globe that tackle some of the most pressing environmental challenges, from plastic recycling to sustainable packaging. With our commitment to the industry in mind, we are proud to introduce the Textiles Recycling Expo. It will be taking place next month on the 4th and 5th of June here in Brussels. This event is free to attend and offers a comprehensive exhibition and conference bringing together the entire textiles recycling supply chain, from material innovators and recyclers to brands and policymakers. The expo will showcase the latest advancement and create actionable pathways towards a more circular textiles industry. We all recognize the urgent challenges our industry faces. Textile waste is at an all-time high, with millions of tons discarded clothing and textiles ending up in landfill each year. Meanwhile, the demand for sustainable material is growing, but scaling recycling infrastructure and crucial business remains a significant challenge. As regulation evolves, particularly here in Europe, the industry must act swiftly to implement innovative solutions. And this is precisely why the Textiles Recycling Expo was created, to serve as a key platform for action and solutions. Over the 2 days event, we will explore critical topics such as collecting and sorting for end-of-life recovery, textiles recycling in Europe's market, future of circularity in textiles, EU funding for textile circularity, and many more. By bringing together industry policy and innovation, we are creating a space where real progress can be made. We are also proud to align this event with EU Green Week, an initiative dedicated to accelerating Europe's transition to a circular and sustainable economy. The discussion and commitment made at the Textiles Recycling Expo will contribute directly to the broader EU objective of waste reduction, resource efficiency, and sustainable economic growth. Now, this event wouldn't have been possible without the vision and leadership of our founding partners, some of whom are here with me today. Their expertise and commitment have been instrumental in shaping the conversation and solution we explore in June. With that, I once again thank you all for being here today. I encourage you to engage, ask questions, and help amplify this important dialogue. Together, we have a unique opportunity to make circular textiles a reality. I look forward to the discussions ahead and to welcoming you all to the Textiles Recycling Expo in June. I'd like to kick off by introducing our valued structure partner, ReHubs, whose collaboration from the very beginning has been instrumental in shaping our conference program and expanding our exhibitor lineup. And I would like to welcome Robert van der Kerkhof, who took over recently as CEO from Christeloof.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, microphone is working. No, indeed, it's a great pleasure to be here in my new role as CEO of ReHubs. It is a new role for me. However, I've been one of the founding partners of ReHubs. I'm very familiar with the concept, and I'm a true believer in circularity, with the first initiatives on driving circular textiles more than 10 years ago. And ReHubs was really created in order to bring all the people from the value chain together with a very clear mission to drive the adoption of recycled fibers, to de-waste and decarbonize the textile industry, and to scale textile to textile recycling. That is the key mission. And that's why we are very proud to be a structural partner of the Textile Recycling Expo in collaboration with AMI. So thank you very much for the partnership and the opportunity. Also because the vision that they have to create this expo is fully in line with the ReHubs vision, mission, and the strength of having everybody from the value chain represented in one room. The expo will be, for us, an accelerator of circularity. It will bring together the leading operational actors from the whole textile value chain. And it's really critical. As you heard, we're a really critical moment in time right now. The textile industry is in a crisis, but also, as a consequence, in a transition. And I think, as Churchill used to say, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think that's where we are today. And the direction how the textile industry wants to come out of this crisis is very clear. It is towards a circular industry. So this expo, having it now, shows the commitment that ReHubs and its members have to driving circularity, and should act as a catalyst to make sure that we get the capacities in the European Union to de-waste the industry. Also, the location Brussels is really strategic importance. We picked it, as you mentioned already, for the EU Green Week, but also here in Brussels we have very critical stakeholders. European partners are close to Brussels, policymakers are here, but also various governmental bodies are here. And these are all the relevant stakeholders necessary to shape the textile industry of the future. Now, you heard already there's a huge amount of waste, record amount of waste. There are huge challenges because if you want to take that waste, at this moment we don't have adequate collecting and sorting technologies available. That is really the beginning of any circular model. We also have certain financial constraints. If you're starting up something new, it's always in the beginning more expensive until scale and innovation are helping to improve efficiencies. We're not there yet. So having these major challenges to actually establish a circular ecosystem, it also helped for us to create unprecedented opportunities. And they are coming in two areas. Number one, emergence of new technologies. So we will transform the textile industry through different technologies, how the textiles are collected, sorted, and ultimately processed, recycled. Efficiencies will improve over time, and those are the two key components to really drive scale what is needed. At the same time, consumer awareness. We are seeing that consumers are increasingly aware about the garments that they are wearing, about the sustainable impact of the garments, and also as a consequence of sustainability. The brands that are actually supplying the consumers are addressing the shift, and they are building on that consumer awareness. They are working now creating new partnerships along the value chains globally. They are actually going to design more and more for circularity. They manufacture more responsibly. And these are all components on how brands are helping to accelerate circularity in fashion. Now, considering these challenges and opportunities, the Textile Recycling Expo will not be just a gathering where people sit together. It really is a new platform, really designed where people can connect, where education can happen, but also, very important, well, the inspiration can be coming for new investments and technologies for the future. The conference program will really address some key solutions that are going to be critical. It's going to be pragmatic, but also it's going to be a stimulation for conversations. Speakers at the conference will come from all the different stakeholders, from the government bodies, policy leaders, industry experts, academia, innovators, but also the brands. Because it's these companies that actually shape the textile-to-textile recycling future. We're very honored that the conference will be opened with a keynote from Aurel Chiabanu-Dordea, the Director of Circular Economy at the EU Commission. And after her opening speech, there will be a program with very insightful panel discussions with some case studies, innovations, project showcases, also very critical market insights. And all the sessions have been curated to inspire action and also very practical stages to accelerate the circularity. Now, beside the conference, an Industrial Alliance Hub is being set up. During that Industrial Alliance Hub, there will be a facility that meaningful conversations can take place. So speakers, after they have been on the panel, can then actually have dialogues with participants or participants among themselves to go into deeper discussions, but also to create new partnerships. So as you can see, the whole expo, the whole conference is around the partnerships, creating new collaborations, stimulating discussions along the value chain. This expo will be an inspiration for the acceleration through collaboration. So ReHubs has coordinated the Industry Alliance Hub with its partners EURATEX, Fedustria, Denim Deal, and Accelerating Circularity. It is key that this conference take place now. The decisions we make today will define the future of textiles in the EU, but also globally. So on behalf of ReHubs, thank you. Looking forward to join you here back again in Brussels in the beginning of June, and certainly to join us on our long-term journey to drive a true circular textile industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Following on from ReHubs, I would like to introduce you to Karla Basselier, CEO of Fedustria. Fedustria has also supported the Textiles Recycling Expo from the beginning and has been a huge contributor as one of our founding partners as well.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. As the CEO of Fedustria, I'm very proud to present our federation here today as one of the supporting partners. For those who are not familiar with our organization, so Fedustria is a Belgian federation of the textile, woodworking, and furniture industries. We represent about 1,600 companies in Belgium. Most of them are SMEs, and they have a global footprint. Whilst they have an annual turnover of about 11 billion euros, they export globally, internationally to the EU, but also third markets. What is our role as a federation? Well, first of all, to support our industries through advocacy at the Belgian level, but also European level, together with EURATEX. And we also share a lot of information on regulatory developments. We provide close guidance on social, economic, and environmental challenges. But important to the event today, we also are committed to driving the transition towards circularity in the textiles industry. This event, so the Textiles Recycling Expo in Belgium, comes at a crucial moment for our industry. It will definitely offer a platform to accelerate the shift towards a more circular economy. And whilst we all believe that our industries are constantly innovating, we also have to face some facts. Only a percentage of all textiles are currently recycled. And in response to that, we know that the European Commission has launched a wave of new legislative initiatives aimed to increase textile recycling and circularity. You are all familiar with the legislation, the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, the Waste Framework Directive, including an extended producer's responsibility, and soon also the Circular Economy Act. And this flood of new regulation is pushing our companies to adapt at a very rapid pace. And as Robert said, our industry is still under pressure, is still fragile. And it's therefore that we call upon the EU as well as on other policymakers that this legislative momentum must be matched with strong support mechanisms. Mechanisms that generate viable market demand and a solid business case for recycled textiles. And only under such conditions, companies will and can invest in circular business models, in infrastructure, in scalable textile recycling technologies. So again, a call upon the policymakers to help us to create that business case. But important to come back to the event. Why are we supporting as Fedustria this expo? Because we strongly believe that Europe needs to come together, that the textile industry and companies need to come together and to unite. From the raw material producers to the reuse operators, to the recyclers, and even to the brands. We need to share practical information, expertise, foster collaboration across the European value chain, because as you all know, circularity does not stop at national borders. So it's in that spirit that the Textile Recycling Expo is a very welcome initiative we like to support, and it's even the first event in Belgium fully dedicated to textile recycling. So it will definitely offer a unique networking platform to exchange ideas, explore new recycling technologies, foster collaborative innovation, and build momentum. And it will also be an opportunity to influence Brussels policymakers. So we are proud as an organization, as Fedustria, to be part of this event and also to be part of the Industry Alliance Hub, as Robert already mentioned, where we'll join forces with some partners here. And together with Dirk Vantyghem from EURATEX, I will also deliver a keynote speech highlighting the key enablers to make textile recycling a success in Europe through collaboration, to financing, and through policy, smart policy. So I hope to see you all at the first Textiles Recycling Expo in Brussels in June in the month. Thanks.
Thank you, Karla. Next, I would like to introduce you to Julia Ettinger, the Secretary General from EuRIC. EuRIC has also been a founding partner of the Expo and has played a vital role in shaping the direction of the event as well.
Thank you very much. Does the microphone work? Yes? Okay, perfect. So on behalf of EuRIC, I'm actually also not sure it works, but hello, hello, it works? Wonderful. I got the thumbs up, so it does work. Then again, on behalf of EuRIC, the European Recycling Industries Confederation, I'm also really happy to be here and proud to support the Textile Recycling Expo as an official partner. I think the event comes at a really crucial time for the textile sector and also, of course, for Europe's really broader efforts to move towards the circular economy that we are talking about for many, many years. Our role as EuRIC, but in particular as a supporting partner of this expo, goes actually beyond visibility, because we do need to amplify the voices of the European textile reuse operating sector as well as the recycling sector. We need to share practical know-how and building momentum for European policies that can unlock the full potential of the textile sector and also address the unprecedented crisis that we are currently facing. At EuRIC, we have our own textile recycling branch that brings together national recycling federations and companies across Europe that work directly in textile collection, sorting, and recycling. Our textile branch, as the voice of the European textile reuse and recycling industry, is the leading actor in promoting the interests of that industry before the European institutions. On top of our own events that we also organize dedicated to textile circularity, we just held one on the 27th of March, also here in Brussels. We are really proud to support any initiative that can spark conversation to drive the change that we need to get to the circular economy. Our commitment as EuRIC here is very, very clear. We have been actively engaged in shaping EU legislation on textile. We heard already before the revision of the Waste Framework Directive, for instance, guiding the eco-design for sustainable product regulation, but also far beyond. We work to ensure that policies actually reflect the real operational challenges that our members are facing, but also show the tremendous opportunities that lie ahead if we get the framework right. That's why we are here, actually, to exchange, to collaborate, and also to push forward solutions that can actually work. And I think the Textile Recycling Expo is really a great opportunity since it brings together the whole value chain. When we talk about the industry's key challenges, we have to, and we heard it already, we have to start at scale. Today, only a very small fraction of textiles in Europe are recycled into new textiles. We are seeing growing volumes of textile waste, often low quality. We are also seeing still far too much of the textile waste being incinerated and landfilled. We have, on top of that, we heard it also before, the lack of harmonized collection systems. We have still limited sorting capacity, and we face the rise of ultra-fast fashion. So an urgent need really to invest into textile-to-textile recycling solutions and technologies. So that the picture becomes, to me, very, very clear. We do need decisive action now. But there is also a bright side. I never like to just talk about the negative side. We have to talk about the bright side. I think there are enormous opportunities if we ensure that also recyclers sit at the table and that systems are designed with circularity in mind from the start. But it is also important that the industry, the textile reuse and recycling industry, is being supported currently with emergency financial support to keep on operating as they have been doing for many, many decades. But this also means creating partnerships to make sure that it works, from brands to producers to collectors, sorters, and recyclers. It means investing in the infrastructure. It means supporting Europe's textile reuse and recycling businesses until we have the extended producer responsibility that's currently being finalized on European level. This is where I think the textile event plays a very, very big role. The Expo will play a vital role because it's a platform for dialogue, innovation, and, this is my big hope, action. We have many people at the table. We heard we have the Commission, we have policymakers, we have industry players. Together, I think we can spark many conversations, connections, and collaborations. And I personally really look forward to seeing all of you there in June. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia. Lastly, I would like to welcome Dirk, the Director General of EURATEX. We are proud to have EURATEX on board as one of our key associations, joining our Industry Alliance Hub. Their involvement reflects the shared commitment across the sector to drive real progress in textile circularity and sustainable transformation. So please join me in welcoming Dirk to share a few words as well.
Thank you, and good morning also from my behalf. That works? Okay. A lot has been said, so I don't need to repeat what my colleagues, my dear colleagues, have said before, which I can fully subscribe to. For those of you who would not be familiar, EURATEX, our mandate is to represent the entire European textile ecosystem, which is around 200,000 companies in the EU, generating 170 billion euro. So we represent the entire textile industry, fashion products, but also technical textiles, medical textiles, so the whole kind of textile system that we have here in Europe. And obviously our focus is on how to maintain or how to support the competitiveness of that textile ecosystem here in Europe. We heard everything about sustainability, how Europe is developing, has launched its textile strategy, its sustainability plans. And for us, the big question, the single most important question is, how do we reconcile sustainability and competitiveness? So how do we indeed push our companies towards reducing their footprint, being more sustainable, and at the same time remain competitive in this textile industry, which is a very globalized sector. And for that, I mean, the analysis has been mentioned before. We have an issue of we have to focus on the regulation, the regulatory framework, which is being made. We have to focus on the demand side, the consumer dimension. We have to focus on technology, the recycling technology, which is not always up to standards, let's say. We have to focus on the global competition. So all these elements are very much on the table. And again, our daily work as EURATEX is to work with the policymakers, work with our companies to make sure that we create the right framework, the right conditions for our companies to make that transition, to make that green transition, but at the same time, with a bit of exaggeration, to stay alive, because that is really what we are facing today. And in that context, obviously, we welcome the initiative of this Textile Recycling Expo, because as was said before, it will showcase best practice from a technology perspective. It will put on stage latest developments on that regulatory framework, which is being developed here in Brussels. It will facilitate dialogue across that textile value chain, which we need very much. So all the, I would say, ingredients, all the elements that are necessary to make a successful transition are kind of embedded in the event, and therefore, obviously, from EURATEX, I would say this was like a no-brainer to say, let's support this initiative from AMI, let's promote it, let's make sure our companies participate, discover new technologies, talk to each other, create alliances within ReHubs or others. So we certainly look forward to have a strong participation and hope that it can give that, I would say these days, that extra belief with companies that moving towards sustainability is something that can be rewarding, because that is probably the biggest challenge that we have right now. We see companies, textile companies in Europe, who have made the investment in recycling, in collection, in developing more sustainable textile products. So they made the investment, but they do not often get rewarded for those decisions. So that's the fundamental change that we need to bring about, how to reward, how to make sure that the entrepreneurs who go for sustainability, who try to reduce their footprint, who come up with new technologies to have less water consumption, to develop alternatives for chemical products, all those people who make those commitments, who make those investments, as of today, the market does not reward them sufficiently. And that's the big change that we need to bring about. Otherwise, those forward-looking entrepreneurs will be discouraged, will maybe stop making the investment, and then it's a lose-lose. We lose as a textile industry, but also the planet loses, because the textile industry globally will continue to have a significant impact on the planet. So that's the fundamental change that we need to try and bring about. And again, it's a combination, it's the regulation, it's the demand side, it's the technology, it's working together. So all these elements that we need to push. And once again, the event beginning of June will hopefully be a good kind of catalyzer to bring about that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. That's the plan indeed. I want to thank all our contributor partners who have delivered powerful statements and joined us here today to show their support for the Textiles Recycling Expo and the broader mission of advancing circularity in textiles as well. Now, this press event reflects the incredible momentum behind our initiative. The Textiles Recycling Expo is going to bring over 110 exhibitors from across the globe, showcasing innovations in sorting, shredding, fiber regeneration, and circular product design. And we're also proud to introduce several immersive and exciting features at the Expo as well. Live demonstration will be held by key technologies pioneers, including Vantyghem, Mesdan, EURATEX, and Techno, showcasing automated sorting to cutting-edge shredding, so the industry can experience this firsthand. As mentioned by our partners here today, we have introduced an industry alliance hub, bringing together key associations and facilitating dialogue, partnership, collaborations. Our partners at Fenova as well will also be on the show floor and at their Fenova funding help desk. And they will be providing free guidance and EU funding opportunities to support new ventures that we desperately need as well. And we've got some really well-known exhibitors on the floor plan, some notable ones that include Stomra, Andritz La Roche, Pure Loop, and also Big Visa, our valued gold sponsors as well. From material traceability to next generation recycling equipment, this event is a platform for breakthrough technologies that are reshaping the value chain. And we're, as been mentioned earlier, we're also honored to welcome Aurel Cubano-Dordia, the Director of Circular Economy from the European Commission, as our opening keynote speaker, a timely and critical voice as regulatory frameworks begin to take shape and drive real change. Their participation underscores the growing recognition at a policy level of urgency and opportunity within this space. As we close, I want to reinforce why your presence as media, policymaker, industry experts, and innovator is so important. This is just not an exhibition, it's a live, evolving conversation about the future of textiles. The issue we face, from textile waste to legislation and innovation gaps, are developing in real time. That's why it's vital to be present, to participate, and to help shape the solutions as well. We invite all members of the press to help amplify this story. Media coverage plays a key role in informing, inspiring, and accelerating the transition to a circular textile economy. Now, registration to the expo are completely free, and it gives you access to the conference as well. That's been curated thanks to our partners at ReHubs. The show is going to be again on the 4th and 5th of June, and you can find the full details of our exhibitors lineup, the conference program, and all the networking features on our website. And once more, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you to Brussels next month. Thank you very much. Now, we'd like to open the floor to any questions from the press or attendees, either in person or virtually.
Maybe. Do you have some global figures about the recycling of... sorry. Thank you. Do you have some global figures about the recycling of textile in the industry? What does it represent today?
Yeah, maybe I can take the question, and then of course you can all add on. So actually there are no real global figures yet. I think everyone knows the figure that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has put forward, around 1% of closed loop recycling that's happening, and these numbers, they are already a bit, or this number is already a bit older, but I think it's probably still relatively valid. But I would also stress that it really depends what you consider recycling. If you consider only textile to textile, I think that's still the number, but we also have and this is ongoing for decades, wiper production, which some may call downcycling, and yet it's also still a big part of the whole value chain, I would say. So making out of old t-shirts, out of old clothing, you make wipers, you make insulation material. So this, while I don't have a number, but this is a bit more significant than the textile to textile. But of course, I think the number says it all. We do need to scale up so that that number gets higher and higher. But maybe anyone else has...
No, I think indeed, I mean, you summarize it well, but the recycled content, for instance, we're talking about polyester, is mainly bottles going into fibers. So that is indeed not really textile to textile recycling. And the problem that we have, and that you've also heard today, is that the amount of textile, post-consumer textile waste is just piling up everywhere. A lot of the warehouses are currently full, and that then ends up in incineration or in landfills. So it's very important that every individual fiber in the whole textile industry is able to recycle, to minimize that waste at a very high quality level, so that you still can guarantee durability, etc., of garments. So right now you see a lot of new initiatives coming, but we're really early stages, but innovations have come a long way. 5 years ago, fiber-to-fiber polyester recycling was not yet possible, maybe at a few universities. And now you've got more than a handful of startups that are really addressing the scale-up of this. So you can see innovation is really kicking in. You see that each of these innovators is coming to a level right now that they are ready for scalability. And I think Dirk mentioned also very careful, we need to be honest about the state of the industry. Big premiums for recycled content cannot be passed on to consumers in textiles. So that's why if you ask consumers, do you want recycled content, everybody will say yes. If you ask consumers, are you willing to pay a premium for it? That's a little bit difficult at this moment. Maybe what we've seen in discussion with the brands, certain sustainable collections are possible, but not at scale. So we need to drive down the scale level. That is global, of textile to textile recycling, and that's why this expo is going to be an accelerator to achieve that vision.
Thanks. David Aviago, journalist for Argus Media. I was wondering if you could give that same type of question, but specifically for the EU, the percentage of textiles that are currently recycled, how you see that going for the future, what will we be at 2030, and how the EU, how EU laws can play into that. I don't know which Is this the single, not the single, but the plastics, the polymers recycling things that, mirroring, I suppose it's the single-use plastics directive or other things. And how will this affect demand of, outside Bangladesh, Pakistan textiles? And the second thing is, you mentioned the price issue. What's the premium of EU recycled textiles compared to what's coming in from outside the EU, and how can that be addressed? Will we get some type of adjustment mechanism to force demand for recycled textiles? Thanks.
So what we've done a few years ago is we did a technical economic feasibility study to saying, hey, where do we stand right now on circularity textiles in Europe? And you can see that the amount of textile waste that is being collected actually is increasing. The problem is, what are you going to do with that waste? And we've, I think, created now a situation that there is more waste being collected, but there's not enough capacity to sort it and then afterwards to recycle it. So you see investments currently going on in mechanical recycling, which of course is a very important step, where you can take certain garments, pull them apart, create new fibers, and then make them into new garments. You see the first stages of the chemical recycling, which is then the last step. If there's no more reuse or mechanical recycling possible, you need to go to chemical recycling. And there we are seeing only lab scale capacities at this moment, so really peanuts compared to the consumption of the European consumers. At ReHubs, we've said if we have the right support to finance the transition, if we can help indeed the investors that are innovating, that are investing in capacities, but also if we can help the brands, retailers to maybe temporarily pass on the higher cost or compensate for the higher cost that they cannot pass on to the consumers, we should be able to have 2.5 million tons of textile to textile recycling by 2030. That's a 2.5 million tons.
As a percentage out of 8.
Out of 8 million tons of collected waste, 2.5 million tons of that will be recycled. So that means there will be more garments being collected, right? We believe that is going to be 8 million tons. Out of that, 2.5 million tons could be recycled. Now, what does that mean, 2.5 million tons? It means that you really need to build a capacity very, very fast. And what we see now is that there are investments underway, but we're not yet on track to achieve that 2.5 million tons. However, we do collect more waste. So that's why we have an issue right now. That's why the timing of this conference is so critical.
Maybe complementing, the fundamental problem is that today the cost of a recycled fiber is higher than the cost of a virgin fiber. So it's cheaper to get polyester made straight out of the factory than to go through the whole process of collecting garments, recycle them, and make recycled polyester.
What's the difference?
It depends on it depends on the fiber, 10, 20, 30%. Depends if it's wool, polyester, etc. You're talking €1 per kilo, I think, for polyester, more or less. For virgin.
So the virgin polyester China is one. Yes.
And then it's 1.2, 1.3, and you can say it's. Then there's discussion, what is the share of that cost in the end, and the value of the end product? Sure, and you can say in the end it may be a few euros, but that's where the competition in the fashion industry comes in. It's so fierce that even a few cents difference in the raw material, in your fibers, makes the difference in the competition between brands. So we're stuck here that some brands may want to say, let's use more recycled material. It costs us a little bit more in the production, maybe not so much in the final product, but even that small difference leads to a competitive disadvantage. And that's indeed where we say the only way forward is that we need a regulatory framework, we need legislation that will make it somehow compulsory for everybody to use recycled material. Otherwise, there will always be competition for those that go for the cheapest option regardless of the environmental impact. And that is where legislation, it's a bit strange to say it from an industrial perspective. Normally we don't like legislation, but if you want to really create a more substantial demand for sustainable fibers, so therefore for the whole recycling kind of concept, we need the regulatory framework, because the consumer is not able or willing to pay more. The brands have this fierce competition among themselves. You all know about the online platforms, what happens today in terms of fast fashion. So if we want to really make it happen, we need that regulatory framework.
Yeah, maybe I can just add quickly onto this. I agree very much with Dirk. Normally, we don't want regulation, but we see here it's necessary. We have seen, as recycling industry, we have seen exactly the same playing out a few years ago for the plastics recycling industry, where the Single-Use Plastics Directive was the first to set recycled content targets. Now we see it in the batteries regulation, we see it in the packaging and packaging waste regulation, and in the future we will see it in the eco-design regulation also for textiles. While it's not going to be easy to define a certain threshold, a certain percentage, I think this is again where collaboration will play a key role to see what's feasible on the recycling side and what can be taken on the producer brand side. It is absolutely crucial. And the best example again is the plastics recycling industry, where we have seen also the industry being in crisis before, because the same happened. Oil prices are lower, so it's cheaper to buy virgin plastics than recycled. But with recycled content, during COVID, for instance, the demand stayed stable for recycled materials, and the industry was able to push through. But now we also have, in order to not make the same mistakes we have made there for textiles, we have to also take into account the global level of it all. Because when we put in the eco-design regulation recycled content targets in Europe, of course the European producers will be obliged to use recycled materials. But you know, the textile business is a global business. So we will need to take that into account, and we need to scale up globally. Be it on recycling, we may have to find more production in Europe again, but I think this is going to be a long-term project to get the circularity for the textile sector right, because it is such a global business.
Christian Nielsen, freelancer, but I have written in the past for Impact Investor. So you were talking a little bit about obviously getting more capital into this and more investment. And obviously you've spoken about the sort of support. I presume you meant public, but what kind of private inputs do you need? I mean, in terms of investments in Europe in particular, but worldwide. And how are you going about getting that impact investing I'm talking about? And ultimately, you know, it's a little bit out of favour now for some reason, but.
Yeah, so again, it heavily depends on the various technologies. But when we did the test, the technical feasibility study, we came with a ballpark investment of 5 billion in order to have the 2.5 million recycled content. The value, however, generated by that is about 8 billion. So what it clearly shows is once you're at scale, yes, significant amount of money is required. However, there is a business case. There is a business case that those investments will have a return. Now, we see that from the various investors. Europe is one of the, well, I would say the most innovative region in the world. We have, when you're looking at recycling, we have companies like ReHubs from France. We have Carbios, which is in France. You have Basselier in Stockholm. Then you have the various mechanical innovators in Europe. So it is amazing that the European companies, also when you talk about collecting and sorting like a Tomra, etc., they are the ones that are globally leading in innovation throughout the value chain. And they do find money for investments. So now the money at this moment from various investors, and you can look at the various startups, is available. Hundreds of millions have already been invested. To give you an order of magnitude, if I have a small pilot line of chemical recycling, you're talking about a couple of millions, but that's lab scale. The moment I go to a pilot line that is going to demonstrate the business case, the continuity, the qualities, etc., I need somewhere, whatever the technology is, but the ballpark is always around the 70 to 110 million. That's the order of magnitude. And various of these are currently being built, various of these are in progress. That money is available. The problem is that if you want to then afterwards go to a large-scale investments, you're talking again heavily depending on the technology. I'm talking about chemical recycling here, somewhere between the 300 and 600 million. So these are big amounts. Now, what is really important for investors is, first of all, is there a demand? Is there a market? And that, of course, is then coming back to the economics, the scale, and the incentives. But at the same time, what's the regulatory framework? Because no investor is willing to invest if there's insecurity about which targets have to be met by when. So that's why at this moment, money is available. I personally, having, including the EIB, including the World Bank, etc., various of these initiatives, they're all very, very supportive. And I believe that the close cooperation between the private sector and the public sector will make significant funds available if the regulatory framework and the demand is clear.
Maybe just quickly adding, you may follow the discussions we have on the Circular Economy Act currently. The Commission is, we don't know in detail, but is making investment part of the deal. And indeed referring to the EIB, European Investment Bank, that should become part of this Circular Economy Act package to bridge that investment gap that we have. So it is also on the radar of the EU.
But maybe to add again another level of complexity to it, it is on the radar of the EU, which is great. But the Circular Economy Act, for instance, that we are referring to, will only be applicable as of earliest end of next year, or even later. So those companies, and this is sorting, but also recycling companies, because the investments, as Robert just mentioned, they are massive. That needs to be done. Some are struggling currently. And neither the EPR scheme nor these promised investments will help in the short term. This is something where emergency funding needs to be unlocked somehow in a wishful world. But that is really the problem. We see more textile waste coming, especially into the collection sorting facilities. And therefore, they would need to scale up quickly, because you probably know how textile sorting currently or traditionally has been done. It's a manual business. So that means a person decides what is going to happen with each item that comes into the sorting facility. Very labor intensive. And while they are very fast, it is slow compared to automation. And for automation, from the brands we have heard, Valva and Tomra offer this, others do offer it as well. Again, investments are needed, and the waste side of things, so recycling and sorting, are primarily small and medium-sized enterprises. So the investment capital is relatively limited. But of course, there are front runners, and I think we are moving towards the right direction, but financing is always, I think, a problem. But we are moving in the right direction. I think the EU has also realized the need for this. So that's the good news, I think, to take away.
I don't want to have another question. So if we look at the plastics recyclers, I mean, I'm just looking at a press release from March. Crisis in the EU plastics recycling. I think I've done that story a couple of times. They're dying out. They can't happen. I see that for the steel sector. It's the same. They can't shift to green steel. It's that same type of, maybe it's on carbon emissions, but it's the same idea that imports are just too cheap. And I was wondering, you're embarking on this, this trajectory towards recycled. I think you'll get to eventually to the rate of recycling of aluminium or whatever, but I don't know when. But the market conditions aren't there. The framework's not there, and it doesn't sound like we want to pay for that, or politicians are going to adapt the laws to make it possible for you to. Am I being too pessimistic, or do you hear? No one's here from the Commission, I don't think but do you hear something nice from the Commission, or do you think you should, be realistic? Thanks.
Well, maybe to very quickly start with this. I mean, obviously, what we hear, I think there are very positive signs from the Commission to say that with the textile strategy that was published already outlining the future. But of course, we are still in the implementation phase of that textile strategy. And for instance, EPR schemes that we just mentioned previously, they are not yet in place across the EU. So it's, a little bit the chicken and the egg dilemma, isn't it? What comes first? What will incentivize who first? For, again, the example of the plastics recycling industry, plastics recycling is ongoing for a while already. It's very, very established in the EU, and yet, as you mentioned, they are in crisis due to imports of cheap recycled material from outside of the EU. This is something that we may face for textiles as well, but I think we still have the chance to set the framework differently now, because we are still in the legislative process. We are also still developing some additional technologies here in Europe, and we are very much at the beginning of that. So I think the setting is different, plastics versus textiles. Also the legislative setting is completely different. If we look at plastics, there is an export ban of recycled plastics outside the EU kicking in very soon. We don't have that for textiles, so the global market can thrive, hopefully still. And we do have recycled content targets for plastic, so that's the good news. But I think it's different, and we cannot compare, and yet some issues may be the same in the future.
Yeah, just it is a challenging period for sure, and time is against us. And there, as Julia said, the slowness of the whole procedure, in terms of regulation, in terms of financial support, is against us. How long can those companies who made the investment, who are trying to move forward, how long can they survive, even financially, until the market will grow? So we need to cover that time gap that we currently have. That's for sure. So time is against us, so to speak. And the second element that we mentioned before, for textiles specifically, is that global, the global nature of our sector. And therefore, anything we try to do here in Europe, we try to be a green island, but if the rest of the world is not with us, we're in big trouble. And so I often say this EU textile strategy should become a global textile strategy, so that ideally we all set the same sustainability standards, we have the same targets, the same definitions, the same criteria. That's a bit wishful thinking, I know, but at least we need to try to push in that direction. Because if we try to be the best pupil of the class just here in Europe, textiles is so globalized, we import billions of euros of garments every day. We need to have the rest of the world with us, otherwise it will not happen. But we need to believe, and again, talking to companies every day, there are those prime movers, there are those that believe, and again, that's our job, to make them, to do everything possible to make them successful. But it's a difficult journey, that's for sure.
Hello, my name is I'm a journalist from Vietnam Television, National Television of Vietnam. As you know, that Vietnam has a big industry for textile, and the export to European country much. So my question is, if the EU would like to promote circularity in the textile industry, it means that the higher price for the textile product. And the second point, young generation like trend the fashion type every day. So circularity textile, it means that they have no chance to change their fashion tie. So, do you think that the policy of EU is suitable for the reality that the higher price and cannot make the younger generation change their trending? How do you think about the policy and the reality, the 2 points? And what are the reacting from the European enterprise in textile industry if their revenue may be affected by the policy?
Well, starting with the last point, so how the companies react, again, they are obviously very concerned about their competitiveness, as I said at the beginning. They face these new regulations that essentially will push them to produce more sustainable, higher quality products with possibly recycled contents, so that has a cost. And their standard question is, if we incur that higher costs, what happens with our competition outside Europe? And that's something where we need to find a solution to make sure that we can maintain a level playing field between those manufacturers that produce more sustainable garments versus those that, as my president says, put the costs of the environment on the planet and not on the product. So there's no easy solution except to say that Europe in the future will be more strict to control the quality and the compliance of products that are made outside Europe. So for example, made in Vietnam. There will be more strict control that a product made in Vietnam will comply with all those new quality criteria, with chemicals that can no longer be used, all kinds of environmental standards that will need to be respected. So to maintain this level playing field between European and non-European manufacturers, there will for sure be a more strict control at the border of market surveillance to make sure that everybody who is selling garments in the EU is producing according to those same quality criteria. That's the plan. How to implement that plan is another discussion, but that's at least the what the EU is trying to do. Then your point about the young generation, you were referring to the cost or the possibility to pay for more sustainable garments. Was that your concern, or?
For young generation, it means that quick fashion. They would like to change clothes every day.
Yes, on the behavior. You mean the consumer behavior. So how do we change consumer behavior? It's a good question. Anyone has a? I mean, I can have some ideas, but I don't know if other colleagues have better ideas. For sure, it's a fundamental issue. And is it a consumer behavior, or is it the behavior of the brands who influence the consumer? I think it's probably a mix of both. But we need to address for sure the demand, the market. So how do we tackle this ultra fast fashion? How do we convince the consumer that it's maybe not necessary to buy 10 T-shirts and send back 8 of them, or buy stuff which they do not wear? How do we promote, the quality, the value of buying a more sustainable garment? More transparency, more information to the consumer, for sure. And there is this digital product passport coming into the picture. Should we try to come up with a clearer information towards the consumer that he can better understand what is the environmental footprint of a T-shirt or a trouser? So more transparency can help, I think. Then the price will always remain a critical barrier. So young generation, limited resources, is looking for, if they can buy something cheaper, they will go for something cheaper. That's not really a solution or an answer, but yeah.
I think no, you're very right there. So I think the consumer at this moment is very confused. What is green? What is not green? Even in this expert panel, you hear a lot of opinions that are still, unfortunately, all based on very limited facts. And we are the experts, and we have more facts than the consumer has. So how can you expect the consumer to make the right decision if they don't have the facts? So the European Union at this moment with the green claims is at least trying to avoid any greenwashing. I think that's really important because that is one of the key factors why consumers are confused. And then with initiatives like the Digital Product Passport, you're bringing that transparency. And I do believe that there are a lot of consumers that are willing to make the right decision once they trust the data. And we see this in other industry sectors as well. You raise another point, however, and that is about overall the profitability and the growth of the textile industry. And if you look at some of the numbers also published by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where you can see that the amount of garments sold has been growing at a pace roughly twice the GDP growth. So consumers buy much more than what we've seen as an average economical growth. That is not sustainable. That cannot continue because for every garment that's being sold, there are quite a lot of garments that are being produced and not sold. You have the waste in the value chain. And then, of course, you have the end of life. What are you going to do after the garment is no longer in fashion? So that's why circularity is becoming important. But we have to also confront the situation that the textile industry for maybe several years might not be the growth industry anymore that it has been in the past. So companies will suffer, but those companies are really close to the consumer and listened to their customers and to the consumer will be winning even in the new industry. And that's why leading brands are also still setting on circularity. Leading brands are looking at cost-effective solutions. Maybe revenue might not increase at the same pace, but maybe they're looking at margins by having the strategic partnerships, by making sure that over time cost will be lower, but that they really are having a set of consumers that are buying the right products. So I do believe the brands have a very critical role in the communication, like Dirk said, and also in attracting, I'm not going to now mention specific brands, that would be a little bit unfair, but you have companies that have been growing at twice the industry growth rate in textiles with premium products, but a very clear message about sustainability, about design, about circularity. So it shows you that it is possible, even if the market overall is not going to be a growth market, to still be a growth company if you're a leader. But that's why you should stay close to your customers and ultimately to the consumers.
I think what Robert and Dirk said is very, very true, but this is just a personal observation, but I also believe that the younger generations take better care of the environment than maybe older generations have. So I have personally observed more second-hand shops popping up. This is of course, second-hand is actually even better than recycled materials, because if we can give the garment another life, why not? That's even better. So I have seen this, and I've also seen really, especially in the younger generations, the consciousness to look, and here green claims plays a role, but to look, oh, it contains recycled materials. We do, I 100% agree, we do need better information. Where does the recycled content come from, for instance? But I have actually faith also in younger generations, but also older generations, to do the right choice, because we are confronted with climate change every day, and we see that little things like buying maybe the most sustainable choice can already help. And I think we are that conscious. We have that conscience right now that we can hopefully move towards that direction. But of course, a lot of shifts, as we just heard, are needed for that also.
Hello, thank you for your insights. I'm Julia van Langendonk, and I'm a management student studying circular business models, especially in textile. My question comes from a non-producer business perspective. I've witnessed that sourcing and procurement hold a lot of great influence to opt for circular suppliers with circular business models or solutions. My question is twofolded. Does the regulatory framework in Europe sufficiently support or emphasize circular textile procurement. And the second part is, are sourcing and procurement actors sufficiently involved in this dialogue? Yeah, thank you. Should I?
Are sourcing people sufficiently involved in the process, in the regulatory process? Is that your question, or?
Not in the process itself. Does the regulatory framework mandate it sufficiently in their circular procurement requirements? And because I feel like in a company, the people driving this change are often
Sustainability people.
yeah, exactly. So that's more the perspective. I'm from the sustainability circularity perspective.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the beginning of the chain, really getting to the core of the root cause, that's sourcing.
Yeah. I can, how to say, it's more a comment. It's true that even in our committees, our working groups, etc., we see a lot of sustainability people, and internally, I say, I would like to see a few more sourcing people in the discussions, because the sustainability people, I would say, we know what they would say, so to speak, but it's the sourcing people that in the end decide where they buy the products, in which country, in Asia, etc. And the sourcing people will look at costs first of all. Will care less probably about sustainability concerns. So having, keep it diplomatic, having both profiles involved in that discussion is certainly very welcome, I would say, because sometimes indeed you have a, how to say, you get the sustainability people on stage, so to speak, with commitment, with profiling a little bit in some brands, but then the actual people who decide where to buy or where to manufacture the garments are not there. And having both of them on stage, Robert, is maybe something for the GFA to consider.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, so I come from the business. So number one, your topic of the role of the procurement department purchasing is extremely important. In the end, every department is going to just fight for what it wants. I mean, don't forget that circularity might, in the beginning, also not have the same quality. So also operations might not like it. So you have different departments that will do anything to resist it. However, it's all about incentives. So that's why if you want to do a transformation like this, you have to start at the top. Management has to believe in it. Management has to be a visionary. And then in the end, things will come through. And this has been the same with every trend. I mean, and this is not different, to be quite honest. I mean, we're talking about sustainability, but the same was in digitalization, right? I mean, why do we need to be digital? There is no, I mean, we're lucky that most companies have a sustainability department. Very few companies have a digitalization department. It's just an activity under IT. But it starts with the company culture, and I think that is very, very important. And then afterwards, indeed, it is about how do you drive the right incentives down in the organization, and it starts with the designers. It's because they decide what's going to be in the end on the shelves, and it's coming with the purchasing department. And then to your question about then is the legislation enough? The legislation has gone already a long way when it comes to purchasing. The cooperation in a company has, between the various departments where purchasing very often was separate, has changed. Why? Simply because the amount of transparency from the whole value chain that is required right now has increased so much that is no longer this transitional relationship anymore. We're fighting for the penny. If you cannot give me my jeans for 1 cent less, I'm going to go to your competitor. Many more questions about social responsibility, about which dyeing and finishes are you using. So are you REACH compliant? ZDHC initiatives driven by the Greenpeace Detox campaign are forcing companies to consider, the chemical components. that is all kind of different certifications. When we're talking about FSC certification of forestry, it starts with the forest owner, but in the end, it has to go all the way to the brand retailer. So I do believe that on one side, the legislation that is in place, but also the transparency is going to change the way how the departments in a company work much closer together, and is going to actually drive a joint decision and trade-off. When is it enough, and when do we need to do a little bit more, and what kind of premium can I pay? But the value chain of textiles from very transactional, cheap, has shifted in the last 5 to 10 years to which kind of partners in the value chain do I work with right now, and do I want to keep going forward in the future, because it's those partners only that can help a brand to meet the expectations of the legislation going forward.
And just to add, perhaps my colleagues from EURATEX can add, but on the European level, there's also the revision of the public procurement. I thought you wanted to say the same. And this legislation revision that is currently on the way, I think it's for some years to come, but perhaps you can add. The idea behind it is to make a revision and to promote green public procurement. So, because what we see sometimes governments, they only decide on price, and then production made in Europe or production made circular is sometimes disadvantaged towards price. And so there's also that level of governments need to be educated, if I can call it like that they promote circular products based in Europe, made in Europe, instead of only choosing and opting for price.
Yeah, exactly. That was also my attempt to answer your question, because this is actually quite crucial to have also green public procurement. So this, of course, is not for the private companies, but for the governments to purchase, for instance, recycled fibers for a firefighting uniform or something like this. And the public purchasing power is massive. So I think this is really great that the Commission is considering making it mandatory, green public procurement. So for instance, either reuse or using recycled materials. This can be, as I said, for textiles, but it can be a tire for a public bus, for instance. It can be literally anything. And that, I think, is the right way to go. But of course, it is still down the line. The review is just about to start. So, but I think it's known that something has to change.
If we don't have any questions online? Perfect. Any more questions? You can end it on that then. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. Appreciate you. Thank you, our panelists and partners, for attending as well. Appreciate your presence, and hopefully we'll get to see you all in June for the Textiles Recycling Expo as well. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.